Hi, I'm Tom Levy. Welcome to the UC San Diego Qualcomm Institute and our EXODUS2 conference and Cyber-Archaeology exhibition that focuses on the Exodus from the Hebrew Bible. We're using the tools of information technology, AI, to tell the story of the Exodus in new perspectives. We deal with what is the Exodus. We have biblical scholars, Egyptologists, archaeologists, geoscientists, computer scientists involved, and we look at the Exodus in transdisciplinary perspective, from the Exodus in Judaism to Christianity and Islam. Let's go look at the exhibit. Our exhibition has 3 segments to it. And these are new ways of approaching this ancient story of the Exodus. We start with the Israelite desert origins. This is a controversial topic, but we believe that ancient Israel had its origins with what the ancient Egyptians called the Shasu nomads. And so these were people that moved across the Middle East from what is today Jordan and Israel and northwest Saudi Arabia into the Nile Valley. And they did this over a 500-year period. And we have ancient Egyptian texts like the Anastasi Papyrus #1 and #6 that point to that. And we can use these data to explore new dimensions of the Exodus, looking at the ancient Israelites as maybe one of the tribal groups that were part of a confederation of Shasu nomads. But how can we envision what the Shasu actually looked like? Well, we have our new excavations that UCSD carried out. Erez Ben Yosef has been working 105 kilometers south of Feinan in the Arava Valley. For example, he discovered these wonderful textiles in some of the early Iron Age sites and perhaps late Bronze Age that more or less fit in with the Exodus time frame that point to amazing fabrics that have wonderful dyes made from the murex shell, creating the deep purple dyes that we know about from the Hebrew Bible. And they actually correspond with different Egyptian artifacts and murals that we know from Medinat Habu and other sites that actually show what these Shasu nomads actually look like. As you see here, this was a floor tile showing a Shasu nomad with this very typical outfit, and this would be on the floor so that the pharaoh could walk over his enemies. But let's go see how the Qualcomm Institute, the Center for Cyber-Archaeology and Sustainability, is exploring the use of AI in telling the story of the Exodus and these people. Let's go over here. Neil.
Hi,
how are you
Tom.
doing? Great
How's it
to
going?
see you.
Yeah, you too.
Your role in this exhibition has been to take the tools of AI and push the envelope.
Yeah, so actually if you come over here, I'll show you a little bit of what we've been working on. So what's unique about a lot of the depictions of both the Shasu and other Asiatic groups that are represented in the murals is that they have very colorful garb, very interesting clothing and outfits that are very different from what you see in the Exodus movies. And so we thought, if we wanted to really represent what possibly the Israelite contingent or people that would have left Exodus would have looked like, then let's actually use some AI tools to actually be able to recreate that. And so with my students, we used a tool called Marvelous Designer that allows you to actually draw and design clothes that you could print and use in real life. And what's nice about it is you can simulate using physics how those clothes would fit onto your body. So right here we actually have 2 Shasu nomads, different theories on what they may have looked like. And if you remember from the murals over there, one of them, they had this interesting looking yellow polka dot tunic, and then they had a kilt, with essentially like a second wrap on top of that. And so we actually modeled all of those clothes using those tools, and then we brought them into Unreal Engine and draped them upon what we call historic metahumans. And these historic metahumans represent highly accurate representations of real people that have been merged together with thousands of scans of different people's faces so that you can really create any facial structure, any type of face. One of the things that we wanted to do is also simulate not only the clothes but the hair as well. And one of the things that you see in all the depictions of the Shasu is that their hair is pulled back in some type of bun or some type of holder. And so we actually found different kind of hairstyles that actually could simulate that. And here I can just show you that the clothes are all dynamic, so you can just kind of grab on the clothes and move them around. So
this is a game, actually, that people can play, right?
Yeah.
We're in this museum hall that we've created at the Qualcomm Institute.
Yeah, so we created a replica digital twin of the very place that we're in. So we have a museum within a museum.
Awesome.
But now we can actually allow anyone to come to this museum exhibit in VR, virtual reality, or even just on their PC, but they get the extra benefit of seeing the Shasu nomads in real time and get to interact with them and see other things.
This is the Museum of the Future. We just did the desert origins of the ancient Israelites, and now we're moving to the story of the roots of the Exodus. This has been a topic of great controversy in our conference, and so we wanted to highlight different historic maps from the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries of how biblical scholars and theologians represented the Exodus. So that's what you're looking at here. But interspersed with this, you're seeing these photographs of people going through some of these biblical lands that are mentioned in Exodus, like the wilderness of Zin in this photograph. These photos were taken when I actually did a reconstruction of an ancient copper trail route from biblical Jordan to Israel's Negev desert, about 150 kilometers, and I did that on donkeys. So you can see this is the younger me in 1997, and my colleague Mohammed Najjar, who was here presenting at the conference. And all these beautiful photos were taken by Kenneth Garrett, a National Geographic photographer. The photos of the Bedouin nomads on display here, showing the Bedouins with the ground loom, and then biblical Edom, or Edom, which is a location on the road to the promised land, as it were. We wanted to use AI and new techniques to actually map out those routes using Google Earth maps and so on. So Neil, what did you do to make that happen for our visitors?
So there are many different theories on what was the possible route that the Israelites would have taken. Or there's some theories even that maybe there's different exoduses that happened. And so what we wanted to explore is what are all the possible routes that could have been taken, and map them onto true three-dimensional elevation maps so that we can actually see, do these routes make sense? Do they fit with the toponyms? Do they fit with the locations? And so what actually we did is we reached out to all of the different researchers that presented here in this conference and asked them to send us either from Google Maps or from GIS software, the routes that they are suggesting and then they're theorizing where they were. And then we took all of those different routes and we brought them in and we actually displayed them in real time in 3D in the map that we have displayed here. So you can see here that there's different routes and each of them are color coded.
So we've got the Nile Delta over there, which is the hearth area of ancient Goshen, where the Israelites were enslaved. And then on the right, you've got the Sinai Desert Peninsula, and then next to it, the Negev Desert, and then biblical Edom in Transjordan and Moab.
Let's highlight this line right here. So this pinkish line right here,
Yep.
You notice that this one's going all the way down south. So this is a traditionally known location of Mount Sinai at St. Catherine's and Monastery. Because most of the maps the routes that we've gotten, they're drawn on just like a paper map, right? And they're not taking into consideration mountainous regions, right? So this is the theory of how they got there, but it's not taking into consideration the wadis, the different riverbeds, probably the actual route that they take. So immediately this data allows me to see, oh, there's still a lot of research that we need to do to really understand what are the possible routes. There's several different scholars that have argued that they didn't go all the way south to the bottom of Sinai, but actually they crossed almost across, going west to east. And here you can see different possible routes. And one thing you'll know is that there's a conflagration of locations. So one of them is, of course, Sukkot in the area right in here. And you can see almost all of the routes come from the same location.
And Ramses.
And Ramses.
Kadesh Barnea there.
Yeah,
right?
you got Kadesh Barnea.
Yeah.
And then you have here Ezion Geber. And that's a particular area that I'm very interested in.
Right.
Because Ezion Geber not only is mentioned in the Exodus story, but it's mentioned in the stories of Samuel and in the Kings and all the way through the history. And it also connects with the Edomites as well.
That's awesome. And that, in Arabic, that's Tel El Khalifa.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's keep moving because I want to go over here to the geoscience section. And I've got Gilad Steinberg here, who is a researcher at the Qualcomm Institute. And geoscience, there are so many natural miracles mentioned in the Exodus narrative that we brought a whole bunch of geoscientists here to help explain what geological phenomena might help explain the parting of the sea narrative, a pillar of fire, and so on. So Gilad has summarized a lot of that work here. So Gilad, what have we got going in this part of the museum?
So this is station 3, and here we're trying to show kind of like a miniature lab, and we can see all the different techniques that we have used over our research, which is sediment coring, underwater excavations, as well as geophysical surveys, which could all be summarized here in this poster. What you see here is a sediment core, and if you look closely, you can actually see changes in sea levels, possible tsunami events, and formation of wetlands, which all relate to the Exodus story.
And where is this core from? Where did we get this one?
This core was taken from the shallow bay of Dor, which you can see here in this map, as well as all the other data sets that we produced over our research.
Dor, here it is. It's just off the Carmel coast of Israel. Okay, and what do we have over here?
So using the geological data sets, we can then play around with them and produce geoscientific models that you see here. These models could all possess some kind of explanation to the Exodus narrative. And you can see these different scenarios which produce tsunamis, sea level regressions, as well as paleo flooding by the Jordan River.
So all of these models, they were done by our colleague Steve Ward from UC Santa Cruz.
I sat with Steve and I asked him if there's a way that he could export his data not as images played in a movie, but actually just give me the raw data simulating both the topography of the entire Mediterranean, but also the elevation of the tsunami event that occurred after the volcanic eruption. So he sent it to me in all these giant text files that I had to parse and make sense of and do lots of mathematical calculations. But eventually, working with Steve, I was able to take this kind of old school method of generating the data and was able to extract out of it three-dimensional representations of that tsunami event. And then what we did is we took every single timestamp of the simulation and we brought it into Unreal, also using some new code to be able to import in real time the data. And the results is this. And so now, instead of just a video that's stuck in a position that's kind of rendered out, this is all being rendered in real time.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is the pyroclastic eruption of the island of Thera, which happened sometime in the 16th century BCE. And one of the theories, and we don't subscribe to any of these theories, but we like to play with the data, is that this created a tsunami wave that went all the way across the eastern Mediterranean, past the island of Crete, all the way to the Nile Delta and the northwest coast of the Sinai Desert. And that is the locus of some of the most important parts of the roots of the Exodus, and that's one kind of mechanism that might help explain the parting of the waves. Another part of our exhibition is the past portal, in order to help us tell the Exodus story with scientific visualization, as it were. And so here we have 3 screens, and you can watch movie clips of the Exodus in contemporary culture. We start with the early 1920s, 1923, Cecil B. DeMille's The 10 Commandments. It was a silent movie, and we go through a number of movies from the 1920s to the 1960s that were inspired by the Exodus story. We move on to another screen over here, and we're starting in the 1970s. We have everything from Bob Marley to animated films that work on the Exodus motif that you see here. We end the exhibition with some work that was done by my colleague, Professor Shlomo Dubnov. And I asked him to use AI to analyze the text of the book of Exodus, some of the surahs from the Quran, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Herzl, and to look at the themes through time, doing a big data analysis of those texts. And he can see the patterning in the data that help tell us about the notion of resistance, of struggle, of moral uncertainty, and other topics that run through these different literatures. So now let's go look at the last part of the exhibit over here. We're just trying to explain to the public our different activities that focus on digital data acquisition. How do we curate this big data? How do we analyze it? And then how do we disseminate it to the public using the tools of information technology, AI, and so on? That's what we're doing. And we wanted to end our tour with the notion of Exodus next steps. And so our next steps deal with a project to help the University of Haifa in Israel to create the first Israel National Center of Marine Archaeology, because the oceans of the world are the last great frontier for archaeology, and all these historical stories like the Exodus leave some traces that might be found underwater or along the coasts of these different places. And we will use the latest advances in digital technologies and geoscience and so on to help tell those stories. And this will be a center for everybody in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's going to be a way to bring different countries in the region together in what we like to call archaeodiplomacy. Thank you.